Yeah, so welcome for the ninth reading of Ynglinga Saga, and starting from King Hugleik's fall now, and I'll be following the same format of the last episode, so I just comment while I'm reading on the fly. King Hugleik's fall. Alf's son was called Hugleik. He took over the Sviar after the two brothers, as Yngve's sons were still children. So in the last chapter, Yngve and Alf, they killed each other, and Alf was the elder, and King Hugleik is his son. King Hugleik was no man of war, and he sat at home in his lands in the peace seat. He was very rich, but stingy with his riches. So in the peace seat, I've translated literally because it's a word called kyrisete in Old Norse. If you would just say it in Norwegian, where you still can use the word kyrre, it's pronounced kyrisete. And what it means is to sit in, literally, to sit in the peace seat. And I thought it's a nice word because it's almost like a mini kenning. It's used many times when they don't go out Viking, when they don't go out to war, when they just stay at home administering the lands. It's called to sit in the peace seat. Kyrisete. In his hird, he had all kinds of artists, harpists, jig players, violinists. He also brought with him sorcerers and all kinds of tricksters. There were two brothers called Hake and Hagbard, and they were very well known. This is the Hagbard mentioned last time, the warrior hero. And we talked a little bit about that there are some stories in the southern part of Norway where they say he is from that area. And I looked a little bit more up and refreshed upon it, and basically all the Nordic countries lay a little bit of claim to him. There are most, though, in Norway. Like in Sweden, there are some gallows, like two menhirs that are set up, and they're called Hagbard's gallows. But these are from the Bronze Age, and Hagbard would be in Iron Age, mid-Iron Age period. There is, not in the area I talked about last, there are some stories that place him from north of Norway, from the Hålogoland. And there are also quite a lot of stories that place him around the Larvik, modern-day Larvik-Stavern area. And there's even a stone setting called Agnessteinane, which supposedly is his burial place. There's also inland from there, there's also a place that supposedly, like a small alcove under a rock, which supposedly is the place where Signe committed suicide. So, just a brief update on that. Hake is another version of the name, which Håkon, which later is one of the king's names in Norway. Håkon, if you translate it literally, it means High King. There were two brothers called Hake and Hagbard, and they were very well known. They were sea kings and had fought many battles. Sometimes they traveled together, and sometimes each by himself. A sea king is, when it's here in the sagas, it's a noble who didn't inherit the land. So, for example, if you take a really old saga about the progenitors of, like the first kings of Norway, there's one saga which said they were Nor and Gor, two brothers. And the eldest one inherited the land after his father, so he inherited Norway. This is way back, it's just as an example. And the brother inherited the ocean. So he inherited the islands and the ocean. And this was often the tradition that the oldest brother would inherit the lands, and the younger brothers, they would inherit become sea kings. They would inherit the oceans. They would probably get like some men or retainers and resources. So they would have ships, but they wouldn't have land, and then they would have to go out into the world and claim their land. Which is probably why Scandinavian history is, for better or for worse, colored by raiding, going south, like in the Gothic periods and in the Viking era, and perhaps even before. They were sea kings and had fought many battles. Sometimes they traveled together and sometimes each by himself. Many great men traveled with each of them. King Hake went with his army to Svitjod against King Hugleik, and King Hugleik gathered an army to greet him. Then two brothers came to fight with him, Svipdag and Geigad, famous both of them, and the greatest of men. King Hake had brought 12 heroes, and Starkad the Old was with him. King Hake himself was a great warrior. Starkad the Old is a very famous warrior hero in the sagas, and also mentioned outside the sagas, in Saxo and in many places. Sometimes he's almost like a mythological being with several arms and all this, and sometimes he's the son of a mythological being, and many times he's portrayed as a warrior hero. I would say in my head, it's quite likely that he was a very capable warrior hero and not just something of myth, since he's mentioned very specifically many times. They clashed at Fyrisvallene, which are the plains along the river Fyris outside Uppsala, close to the temple areas and all the old important areas. And there was a great battle, and soon King Hugleik's army fell apart. Then the warriors Svipdag and Geigad charged forth, but Hake's heroes went 6 on each of them and had them taken prisoner. Then King Hake breached King Hugleik's shield wall and killed him and his 2 sons. After that, the Sviar fled, and King Hake claimed the land and was made king of the Sviar. He held seat in the land for 3 winters, and while he sat in the peace seat, his heroes went in Viking and gathered great treasures. King Gudlaug's death. Jørund and Eirik were Yngve Alreksson's sons. So this is the Yngve, who was the brother of Olaf, who was the father of King Hugleik, who just died. So these were the younger cousins of King Hugleik, Swedish royalty. Jørund and Eirik were King Yngve Alreksson's sons. They were out warshipping while this was going on, and they were great warriors. It's a little bit clumsy translation, warshipping. It sounds almost like trade, like they were out shipping. But again, since it's not for publication, I want to translate some of these expressions literally, because it could have, the Snorre chose not to say Viking, chose not to say raiding, so there's, slight tones of difference. My head, perhaps if you're out with a warshipping or a war shield, it's kind of an expression of a more coordinated, larger effort than a Viking raid, which can be large scale, but quite often is small, hit and run type actions. So they were out worshipping while this was going on, and they were great warriors. One summer they were ravaging in Denmark, and there they came upon Gudlaug, King of Hålogoland. There's an active crow close here. And there they came upon Gudlaug, King of Hålogoland, and held battle with him. Now, Hålogoland is the part from modern-day Trøndelag. If you have Norway, you have the big fat part in the southern half of the country, and then you have the thin part going up north, way up north. Hålogoland was the northern part, so it starts from where Trøndelag, which is the areas around Trondheim. So it starts north of that, following the coast up to Bodø, Harstad, Tromsø. And in those times, before the coal spell in the 1200s, it would probably go very far north. Now, exactly where in Hålogaland Gudlaug was king, because there were several small kings, it doesn't say. But there were many kind of power centers there, like especially maybe Bjarkøy, which later would have many important chieftains and such in the sagas. So perhaps he was from the Bjarkøy area outside Harstad. It's a very beautiful area. So anyway, they came upon Gudlaug, King of Hålogaland, and held battle with him. And it ended so that Gudlaug's ship was wrecked and he was taken prisoner. They took him to land at Straumøyanes and hanged him there. His men made a mound for him there. So Straumøyanes is really hard to place. I haven't really read anybody who places it with any certainty, because he's apparently in Denmark raiding. And when they say Denmark at this time in the sagas, it's often meant the islands of Sjælland and Fyn. It can mean Jylland, Jutland. Especially, the parts south of Limfjorden. But the problem is there aren't many candidates of an island with Straumøy means island with currents around, like strong ocean currents or such. And there aren't many islands like that. The only one I've found, which I haven't seen mentioned by anyone, probably for good reason, but it's Stryne, which is south of Fyn and Sjælland, close to Langeland. And this island, I've seen people write that if you take from Old Germanic, then Stryn has the meaning of Straum in Norse. And so it would make sense. And there's also a bay, like the bay at... there's a nes there, or like a headland, which divides the bay, like is explained in the poem later, which would fit. The only issue I have with that is that if you take like the Norwegian places that have Stryn in them, it's not the same root. There it's from likely from Stryon, which means a place of good fishing, which Stryne is. So it's a little bit. But according to that it's in Denmark, that it has a nes, a headland that divides the bay, main bay, which actually it does. The harbor there goes out on this nes today. It would fit the description. Otherwise you would have to go to Norway. There are many Straum, places with Straum in them there, but then the geography is way off. And I don't think Snorri is usually not that off. Sometimes maybe a little bit, but not that much. So I would say it's unlikely that it was in Norway, or some have also pointed to like Swedish Strömstad. I don't know. I think it's Strömstad is clearly, on the borderline of the Geatish area going into Viken, which is Norwegian areas. So anyway, so Stryne is a candidate, but not at all sure. They took him to land at Straumeiernes and hanged him there. His men made a mound for him there. So says Eivind Skallaspiller. And Gudlaug tamed the fierce because of the aggression of the eastern king's steed of Sigard. When by Yngve's sons the ring wrecker would ride the tree, and the corpse bearer off the headland droops, the swaying tree where it divides the bay. It is well known the chieftain's body by stone is marked at Straumeiernes. So to tame the steed of Sigard, this is again the kenning pointing to Hagbard's fate. The tale of to tame the cool horse of Signe's lover. And again, there's the kenning for the Swedish royalty as usual, Yngve's sons, which is the just placing them in the proper Ynglinga lineage. And then ring wrecker, this is a kenning for a generous man. And to ride the tree is a kenning for to hang, to be hanged, and it's probably in relation again to Hagbard's tale. Yeah, that was all for now, and see you next time.